right, week 13 is in the books. We had blowouts, we had upsets, disasters, and some of the strangest games we have seen all year. But before we get into it, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to me and a lot to this channel. Let's break it all down, starting with Oregon versus USC. And when people talk about football being a game with three phases, they rarely actually believe themselves. Special teams is the one phase that gets ignored most of the time until a game like this reminds everyone how real that 1/3 actually is. Oregon's special teams unit completely flipped this game on its head. If you watch that Malik Benson punt return touchdown or the costly USC penalty that turned a field goal into a touchdown, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But special teams was not the only reason that Oregon won this game. Yes, the score looks like a classic Pac-12 shootout, but Oregon won this game because they played like a Big Ten team, just like I said that they would. They haven't had many chances to prove themselves given their schedule, but one thing stood out all year to me, and that's that they play with Big Ten traits. They're physical, they're disciplined, and they can run the ball. They outrushed USC 179-52. They won the time of possession. They won the turnover battle. And even with all of their injuries, they still had all the edges I told you that they would have. They had the better staff, the better coach, the home field advantage, and they're just the better team. And they won in all three phases of the game. Now, don't get me wrong. What I said about USC is still true. They are not just smoke and mirrors anymore. They've made real progress in the physicality department. They're better on defense. They're much improved compared to last season. You could see that in their wins over Iowa, Nebraska, and Michigan. But they're in the middle of an identity shift, and that's going to take longer than one season. Progress is being made, but this weekend they went up against a team that is already the team and the things that USC wants to become, so they lost. And unfortunately, that probably ends their playoff hopes for this year. Meanwhile, Oregon looks poised to make real noise in the postseason. Moving on to Missouri versus Oklahoma, and Oklahoma just got another win, just like we expected, against the Missouri team that I've been saying is a bit overrated. And once again, they proved me right here. Like I said, my prediction, this game was going to come down to how effective Ahmad Hardy could be against that Oklahoma run defense. It was one of those classic something's got to give matchups, an elite running back versus an elite defense, and the elite defense won. Oklahoma held Missouri to just 70 rushing yards, and when Missouri can't run, they can't win. The rumors were that Pabula was going to play, and I told you guys whether it was Zollers or Pabula, Missouri was not going to be able to throw to win this game. And what do you know? Pabula played in the game, and they still couldn't do it. 2 interceptions. I've been trying to tell you guys, Pabula is not that guy. Missouri's defense did what they always do. They played well, but their offense just could not deliver. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma, it was exactly what we expected. We knew that this was going to be not a high-scoring game. These are two strong defenses paired with two very below-average offenses. And in a game like that, 17 points was enough to win. Oklahoma didn't do anything crazy. Mateer continues to underperform. They still struggle to move the ball, but every once in a while they'll pop an explosive play, and that's what happened here. This team is becoming one that leans heavily on defense, turnovers, and field position, and they have the edge in all three categories again in this game. And hey, they even outrushed Missouri. And honestly, that's what surprised me the most. Now, a lot of that was because Missouri was in catch-up mode the whole time, but still very impressive. Oklahoma couldn't run the ball to save their lives earlier in the year, but in this game, they found a way to get over 100 yards, which is very impressive against this defense. So now, Oklahoma is one win away from securing a playoff spot, and spoiler alert from the next video, I think they're going to get it. Moving on to Georgia Tech versus Pitt. And Pitt is now officially responsible for the chaos that is the ACC title race after taking down Georgia Tech. And look, this game was wild. Honestly, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, but I think the better team actually lost this game. But the better team did it to themselves. The first quarter was absolutely disastrous for Georgia Tech. Multiple turnovers, terrible decision-making. It was just super rough. It was 21-0 before the first quarter even ended, and then Pitt made it 28-0 early in the second. And it felt like all hope was gone. But to their credit, Georgia Tech did not quit. The problem is, when you dig yourself that deep of a hole, even if you outplay your opponent for the rest of the game, you have to play mistake-free football to even have a chance, and Georgia Tech could not do that. In the third quarter, Tech had a real shot to make this a one-score game. They were at the 10-yard line, ready to score, but then Haynes King threw a 100-yard pick six that felt like the dagger. But then Pitt tried their absolute best to keep Tech in this game with that ridiculous fake punt attempt and the missed field goal, and suddenly this game became a one-score game late in the fourth quarter. But when it mattered the most, Pitt broke off a huge run to ice the game. It genuinely felt like Georgia Tech outplayed Pitt for the final three quarters, but they could never overcome that first quarter catastrophe. And honestly, I'm not surprised. Yes, I picked Tech, but I honestly say this every single week. When Haynes King is on, Georgia Tech can beat absolutely anybody. And when he's not, they can lose to just anybody. And in this one, he was a bit of a mixed bag, and it cost them. So now the ACC is complete chaos. Nobody knows who's going to be playing in Charlotte, and I'm just sitting here hoping that Miami does not find their way into it because everyone else can't get their act together. Moving on to BYU versus Cincinnati, and BYU picked up another win, and now they are one step closer to locking up their spot for the Big 12 championship game. And a lot of people doubted BYU like they have all season, but not me. I did not care that they were going to have to go on the road at night in a tough environment. I still knew BYU would come out on top because no matter how bad that Texas Tech loss looks, Cincinnati just does not have the same type of players to stop BYU from playing their own game. BYU's whole identity is pretty simple. Run the ball, control time of possession, and be the more physical and disciplined team. And they are really good at doing those things. So I'm not surprised at all that they were able to do those things in this game because Cincinnati is not built to match that style. BYU outrushed Cincinnati 265-87. They forced 2 fumbles, or 2 turnovers, I should say, and didn't give up a single one. They had almost double the time of possession, and they had half the penalty yards. BYU won this game by dragging Cincinnati into their brand of football, and Cincinnati could not hang. And to be honest, most teams can't. Moving on now to Kansas State versus Utah, and this game honestly makes no sense. I expected Utah to win, that's sure, but I did not expect it to go like this. And I almost feel bad for Kansas State because they played in a way that should have been more than enough to win this game. But apparently, 47 points is not enough. 472 rushing yards is also not enough. 472. Every single time I put the game on, I felt like Joe Jackson was sprinting across my screen. But it was not enough. It was pure chaos, back and forth. Defense was optional. Just an incredibly fun game to watch. And usually in a game like this, the team that dominates on the ground wins. But not today. I genuinely cannot remember the last time that I saw a team run for almost 500 yards and still lose. But here we are. Late in the fourth quarter, Kansas State went up by 12 points with about 7 minutes left in the game. It looked like they were about to ice the game until they decided to go for 2, and that's when disaster struck in the form of a pick 2. Utah ran it all the way back, and suddenly this is a 10-point game. And even then, Kansas State had Utah stuck at a 3rd and 22 with under 4 minutes left. Game over, right? Nope, Vanderbilt said absolutely not, marched Utah all the way down the field, and made it a 3-point game. And even then, I still felt like Kansas State was going to be able to close it out. Because surely the team that has been unstoppable on the ground all night could run the ball a few times and bleed the clock. Nope again. They got cute, they tried throwing the ball, and all of a sudden Utah had the ball with plenty of time. And they had one last chance, a 4th and 1, and they blew it. Utah capitalized, Devon Dampier making another huge play and bringing them inside the 10-yard line where they eventually scored a touchdown. Kansas State had so many opportunities to win this game, but they just could not finish. And Utah found a way at home to win this game and keep their playoff hopes barely alive. Genuinely one of the most entertaining games of the entire season. Now let's quickly talk about some blowouts that happened this weekend, starting with the biggest blowout, and that's Syracuse versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame absolutely obliterated Syracuse 70-7. And yes, 70 is not a typo. Syracuse is bad, sure, but dropping 70 points is wild. Notre Dame has not scored that many points since the Great Depression. They put up 21 points before their offense even took the field, which does not even feel real at this point. And by the end of the first quarter, they had basically already covered the spread. They had 35 points by the end of the first quarter. And the funniest part is CJ Carr didn't have to do anything. Notre Dame literally dominated with only 67 passing yards because all they had to do was hand the ball off to Jeremiah Love, who is legitimately looking like the best player in the country right now. 8 carries, 171 yards, 3 touchdowns. Syracuse actually had more passing yards and doubled Notre Dame's time of possession, but it didn't matter because Notre Dame could have called the exact same play 40 times by just handing it off to Jeremiah Love and still won by 50 or more. Now, if they beat Stanford, they are basically a lock for the playoffs. Moving on to Vanderbilt versus Kentucky, and a lot of people circled this game as a potential upset, but the only people upset here were the Kentucky fans who paid money to travel to Nashville for this game. Some people don't want to believe that Vanderbilt is legit, but they are. And while I didn't expect this level of destruction, I did expect Vanderbilt to win. They beat Kentucky 45-17, and that's with garbage time baked in. Diego Pavia threw for a career high of 484 yards, and then the backup came in and added another 55 yards on top of that for a total of 539 passing yards. The only team to put up more points on Kentucky this season was Tennessee, who Vanderbilt plays next week. So Kentucky managed only 31 rushing yards, mostly because they spent the whole night trying to play catch-up. This was domination in every phase. Exactly the kind of performance that Vanderbilt needed heading into their biggest game of the year with a playoff spot on the line. And the team they're playing next week, like I said, Tennessee. And they played Florida this weekend, and they had not won in the Swamp in over a decade, but they took care of business really fast with a 31-11 victory over the Gators. There was not a single area of this game that Tennessee did not absolutely dominate Florida. There was even a moment where it looked like the Gators were going to get shut out. And on the bright side, for Florida, I guess DJ Lagway didn't throw any picks. So that's about all the good news I can give you guys. This was a lifeless performance. Florida looks like a team that has just checked out. Tennessee, on the other hand, has locked in and heading into their rivalry game against Vanderbilt, a game where the Vols have a real chance to play spoiler to the Commodores, which is something I never thought would happen. Moving on to SMU versus Louisville. And this one was pretty shocking. Not that SMU won. I was not shocked by that. I picked that. But how they won. 38-6. SMU just tore up Louisville's secondary all game long, and Louisville never had a real response. So with Pitt beating Georgia Tech, SMU suddenly controls their own destiny in the ACC. And if they win out, they're in the ACC championship game. Maybe even in the playoff conversation, depending on how the committee treats a G5 team. After all the chaos in the ACC, it might actually be SMU standing at the end once again. Now let's talk about a few games that left me scratching my head. And for this segment, we are going to be handing out awards. The first award goes to the worst special teams unit in the country, and that is Florida State. USC tried to make their case, but nothing beats 2 missed field goals and 2 fumble punt returns in a row. Genuinely, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. FSU might be the most cosmically unlucky team in the country, but they also do it to themselves. How do you have one of the best offenses in the conference going up against one of the worst defenses in the conference and end up with only 3 points through 3 quarters and only 11 points by the end of the game? And I'll tell you exactly how it is, because every single time Florida State did something right, they immediately followed it up by a penalty, a turnover, or another special teams disaster. The defense, they actually stepped up. They forced 2 straight 3-and-outs late in the game that were kind of negated because of bad special teams plays. There's the first punt that hit the FSU player in the head. NC State recovers. The defense forces another stop. NC State punts again. Returner muffs it. NC State recovers it in the red zone. And the defense forces another stop, but NC State goes for it on the 4th down. And instead of kicking a field goal, they finally just take a touchdown and win the game. And there's always so much that a defense can do when the offense and special teams unit are actively sabotaging the game. And just when you think there's a silver lining that maybe Mike Norvell is being fired because of this game, no. FSU releases a statement the next morning saying he is staying. So, FSU fans, I'm sorry. I do not know who we all collectively pissed off in the universe, but things are not looking bright. And the next award goes to the biggest surprise of the weekend, and that is Wisconsin. Not just for winning, but for beating... That's all I have to say about that. And the award for the biggest surprise of the weekend goes to Wisconsin. Not just for winning, not just for beating a ranked opponent, but for blowing out a ranked opponent. I've been low on Illinois all season, but this is a new low, even for them. Wisconsin has looked awful all season long, and then out of nowhere, they rack up wins against Washington and now Illinois. Congrats, Wisconsin, I guess. Illinois, though, you guys suck. That's pretty much the only takeaway I have from that. And that's all for this video, guys. Please stay tuned because Rivalry Weekend is next week, and you're not going to miss out on my predictions. So see you all next time, and yeah, peace.